Welcome to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Nina Adio, a social media marketing expert specializing in the wedding industry. Each week, we'll explore the strategies, stories, and insider tips that help wedding professionals thrive. You'll hear solo episodes filled with actual advice for social media and inspiring conversations with esteemed wedding industry guests. Thank you for tuning in and letting this podcast be a part of your day. Let's get started. Hey guys, and welcome back to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. If this is your first time listening, hello, my name is Nina Adio, and I am so excited that you're tuning in for this episode where we're going to have our guest Ron on. And if you're returning, well, you're in for more marketing goodies, especially today, as we're going to have another marketeer on to talk all things marketing for the wedding industry. I'm recording this on a very stormy New York day, and I just returned from my first visit to see my parents' new digs in they're located now outside of Charleston in South Carolina. And so whenever I travel, right, and you get out of your day-to-day experience, it can be very inspiring, and I want to share my biggest inspiration, which was what I watched on the plane. I enjoyed it so much. I watched it on the way home too, and it was a Judy Blume documentary. Judy Blume is a middle grade author. She's also a widely censored or book banned middle grade author, but it talked about the impact of her books, the impact it had on the children who read them, and about her life. Oh, was that inspiring, because it's not only about somebody's journey and somebody's motivation and somebody's passion, but then about the impact it has. And I think that's something we all relate to and get inspired by as business owners. You know, there's the reason for what we're doing, and it's not only self-fulfilling, but fulfilling for couples who are having a happily ever after thanks to and because of you. So I highly recommend checking that out. It was, I believe, by Amazon. Or if you're flying JetBlue, look for it. But speaking of inspiration, right? We're going to have a lot of fun today because we are speaking with Ron of Ron and Jess Marketing. And we're talking all about leads, how you can book more of your leads, which I think is particularly important right now as we kind of worry about those things in today's current climate. So Ron is a marketing expert and agency owner specializing in the wedding industry and helping vendors book more weddings through strategic advertising, social media, and sales funnels. As the co-founder of Ron and Jess Marketing, he has spent over 8 years running high-converting meta ad campaigns and designing systems that turn leads into booked weddings. With a deep understanding of why many wedding vendors struggle to get results from their social media ads, he focuses on optimizing both paid and organic marketing strategies that drive real bookings. Beyond ads, Ron also helps vendors leverage email marketing, SEO, and client relationship strategies to build sustainable, profitable businesses. So we're getting really a lot of pieces to the marketing puzzle here today. So I think this is going to be a must listen. If you enjoy what we talk about today, I really encourage you to pay it forward by sharing it with other wedding pros and business owners, and let's really get people inspired and booking with Ron of Ron and Jess Marketing. Ron, thank you so much for being here today. Where are you coming from?
Thanks, Nina. I'm super excited to be here. Jess and I are based out of St. Louis, Missouri, and it is actually started to get sunny now, which is really exciting.
Wow, I said at the intro we are in the middle of like a storm here, but but at least we can see the sunshine on your end. So anyone watching on YouTube will get to see the differences. So, you know, I said at the top of the intro we're going to be talking about leads
but I think a lot of people are thinking, or we're going to really be talking about booking those leads, right? But a lot of people, I think, get fixated in thinking it's not a booking problem, it's a leads problem. They're only focused on the leads. And if they don't book, it's because of the leads itself. So before we get into that, I really wanted to talk about how can we identify that we may have a booking problem?
So I get these kinds of questions all the time from coaching students, clients, and things like that. And I always like to take the approach of, here's an opportunity where we start to, dig into things right away. Put the investigator hat on and really start looking at things. And I think that there's a relatively simple process that you can follow to start to get a handle on these sort of things. And I say start with looking at your numbers. So just right away make sure you're tracking everything. Obviously, this should be in like CRMs or at least in like some kind of a sheet or something where you can look at your lead sources and be like, okay, how many leads am I getting from, website inquiries versus referrals versus, leads from social media ads or DMs from social media or something like that. I think it's important to start there and really break your leads down into categories so that you can view each of them separately because there are drastically different conversion rates for each of these different areas. And so by starting to section things out and view them individually and compare the conversion rates that you're getting to just kind of like industry standards for different things, that in and of itself starts to answer a lot of that question, I think, most of the time, because it can be difficult to just lump everything in one category and be like, oh, the last like 10 leads I got, I only booked one of them. Well, where did those 10 leads come from? Because to book 10% of leads that are coming from something like, a wedding expo or like a social media ad or something like that is actually a very, very good conversion rate. In that sense, you don't really have a lead problem or a booking problem. It's fitting within the norm of what's supposed to be happening. If those numbers are not at all where they're supposed to be within these different categories, then you can start to address, okay, why? And because you've already broken it down to different categories, it's easier then to start to fix those things because it does vary between each one.
I know, Ron, this sounds like a lot of accountability for me. Like it's much easier to say, well, it's the knot, or
Yeah,
it's the climate, it's
yeah,
the state of the world, it's this or that,
yeah.
So I mean, gosh, somebody who hasn't been tracking it, right? Maybe they're like
Mhm.
me, where they like to keep their head in the sand and just roll with it,
Yeah.
not even look. I mean, what's the easiest way to start that? I know you mentioned sheets or CRMs. What do you think works
Mm.
best?
Honestly, I think something as simple as a Google Sheet is probably the easiest place to start. If you don't already have a lot of this information inside of a CRM or something like that, because you are just kind of taking things as they come and seeing how it goes from there, and you're feeling like, well, gosh, I got like a lot of inquiries that are coming in and these just aren't really converting for me. That's the simplest place to start. Just get yourself a Google Sheet. It's free. You can go in and create one. If you've got a Gmail account, you've already got a Google Drive, which means you can already make Google Sheets right now, today, and just start going through and tracking things. Because that in and of itself is a wonderful first step that's going to put you on a better trajectory in total. Because there are so many things in your marketing that, like, if you don't have numbers and clarity of what's going on, it's very, very difficult to troubleshoot things or even just give yourself credit if you're doing well and things are going awesome, if you don't have the clarity of exactly what's happening with that, you may never know.
Oh, yeah, to get the bragging rights and be like, I close 90% of my leads, right? You're not going to
Yeah.
get that bragging right.
Yeah. If you don't know what is 90% of your leads.
Yeah. So before we get into booking, do you find with your students and clients, do you find it's across the board what lead sources tend to work best, or does it vary for everybody?
Oh, that's a really good question. And it definitely, definitely varies because I think, conducting consultations and booking weddings from various different lead sources is so different because the context of those situations is different. And that's a situation in which, like, yeah, it's going to vary a lot. It's very, very difficult to take somebody who excels at something like wedding expos, where they're there and they're networking and they're with the people, and that's just their environment and their jam. It's difficult to take one of those people then and bring them into like an SEO approach and be like, okay, now we're going to get super analytical and we're going to spend a lot of time with software and writing things and like sitting behind the computer, that person's probably not going to excel there. The same is true too. You can have somebody who just really excels at like, the data and like the research and like figuring out like how to capitalize on traffic from different places and developing systems to nurture that ultimately into a booking, and then throw them into a room full of like hundreds of people with all this stuff going on and be like, sell yourself. Like they're just different people.
Absolutely. And I do feel right now wedding expos are like coming back,
Mhm.
obviously post COVID fizzled out, but now I feel like they're really getting their groove again. So if that's your booking style, you now have this great point of redemption.
Yep.
So let's say you've sold somebody, they're like, great, I want to do it. I want to start tracking and I want to start booking more leads. Has to what do they have to do first? Is that a mindset shift? Is it more analytical? Where are we starting?
So first, I think if they've gotten to that point where they're like, all right, time to start tracking my leads, time to start doing things, the mindset shift has already happened. So that's great. To kind of like you said before, like bury your head in the sand and be like, no, 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 I'm just taking things as they come. You can do that for years and suffer for years because you're doing that. So if you're already to the point where you're like, all right, let's start tracking some of this stuff. Let me at least get a sheet or a piece of paper, if nothing else, and just write it down. The mindset shift has already happened. Now, once you have that, it's just a matter of doing it and being consistent, which can be the second hardest part. First, the fact that you need to do this. Second, once you know you need to do this, staying consistent with it. It's not as though you can't continue to track things through Google Sheets and stuff like that. You totally can. And I know you had an episode that was released not too terribly long ago talking about CRMs and systems and things like that. It's not a terrible idea to start looking into things like that, though, because then you can use some automation and things like that to your advantage, and that you don't necessarily have to go back to the sheet every single time you get an inquiry and track where it came from, or once a month or however long go through all your stuff and try and suss everything out again. A lot of just kind of happens for you. At the same time, that does add in some expense and additional things and stuff. So it's something that you can graduate into from just tracking it at all. But it is something that I encourage people to go to sooner rather than later because it will save you time. It's an investment of your money, it's an investment of your time, and just the overall better functioning of your business.
Yeah, and that episode you mentioned, that's episode 161 with Amy Pearson, CRM systems that actually work for wedding pros. And I'm mentioning it because I want listeners to know if they didn't listen to it. That episode was so good that one of the big CRMs, Aisle Planner, was like, we need to work with Amy, and reached out to her as a result of that podcast. So she really nailed it with talking about how CRMs can really be a game changer, not only organizationally in systems, but with your leads and bookings. So in that spirit, once you get the lead, great, but you can't book it until they respond to your next message. So what can vendors do to start getting more responses from those initial leads?
So I always encourage people follow up a lot more than what you think that you need to. The average number of like touch points that you need to have with a new couple before they're willing to book is substantially higher these days than what it was even just like a few years ago. So follow up, follow up, follow up, follow up. Like they've said for years now, the fortune is in the follow up. If you get an inquiry and you respond to somebody one time and then you don't hear anything, and a week or so later, hey, you reach out to them again, you really can't be surprised when a lot of people ultimately are going to end up falling through the cracks, just because we have to keep in mind that couples are planning a wedding. There's a million and one different things they're doing that while we deal with weddings and kind of the stuff that happens with them all the time, for a lot of times for them, this is very much a new experience. And so they're dealing with a lot more than what they're used to. And people will at times reach out to vendors before they're ready to book a particular service. They may reach out to a variety of people. And if they reach out to, say, five caterers or five florists or something like that, and one of them follows up a couple times, a couple of them don't follow up at all, but one just keeps checking in, they may just not yet be to the point to where they're ready to book. And if you're the one who keeps following up, you're going to be the one that they remember. You're going to be at the top of their list, like the top of their mind. And that's the position that you want to be in. Things like CRMs and having good systems in place are obviously key in doing that, because to try and just track all this in your head does then become overwhelming. But the systems are there to help.
Ron, I'm like, as you're talking, my face is changing as I'm realizing like the errors of my ways. Cause like I don't follow up with anybody because I'm fragile, I'm sensitive, I'm busy, I'm insecure. So I just like, if they don't answer, I don't follow up. Then I was like, well, what if I start to follow up? Then I'm like, well, how would I do it? They're just like in my email. Like I don't have any system. So my face is like, as you're talking, is like getting mortified at what I'm doing, and the Google sheet I'm going to need to make after this
Yeah.
call, and the CRM I'm going to need to sign up with. But let's say for those listening, what should we be saying in these follow-ups?
Focus on personal connection and providing value. That keep in mind that like follow-up doesn't just have to be email. Follow-up just means that you are coming back into their exposure like in some way. So follow-up, yes, can be you just manually sending emails to them, but it can also be email marketing, things that can be done via automation. It can also just be, the organic side of social media, getting them to follow you and having them see the things that you're posting anyway. This is a version of follow-up because you're bringing yourself back in front of them again and again. Now, if you were only following up via email, just directly doing it manually, and every single time you were like, hey, are you ready to book? Hey, how's it going? Hey, have you booked your florist yet? Hey, have you done this yet? That is going to become irritating. And it's also like just not that much fun as a business owner, like to be doing. So if you know that there's a variety of different ways in which you can be, in effect, following up with them, and then you add on to the top of that, because you have a variety of ways of doing this, you have opportunity to just provide value to them. This is where things like email marketing and stuff like are phenomenal because you can create drip sequences and things like that that are not entirely centered around just pushing your services all the time, but are rather providing information and value and just being helpful. Couples love vendors who make their wedding planning process easier. At the same time, as a vendor, you only have so much time in the day. So anytime you can center your follow-up around work that you can do one time and then benefit from again and again and again is by its very nature drastically increasing like the quality of the follow-up that you're doing, but not necessarily dragging down your time because it's things that you've only done once and then kept benefiting from, or things like posting on social media, things that you would do anyway, and then by default are going to get you and your services in front of a lot of people at the same time.
When you said it's not just following up, going, hey, you ready to book? You ready to follow up? Like, that's not fun for a lot of people. But I thought of like the one guy who, it is fun for him. Like, and he's always just like, hey, just following up. Hey, and you just want to be like, just stop, please. Give me my peace. So don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. How
Yes.
important is speed when it comes to responding to new inquiries, and how can wedding pros utilize tools if speed is important?
Is absolutely pivotal in my opinion. This is one where we have this like huge double standard in the wedding industry in that like couples are allowed to take as long as they want to be responding to things. But on the vendor side of things, as a service provider, we don't get that luxury. You have to respond to them, I'll say basically immediately. And at the same time, like there's context for that, of course. Like most wedding vendors are not operating with like a super massive team. Like some are, and they have the support of other people, but a lot of people aren't. And they're like, oh, guys, like how am I supposed to be like following up immediately with people? This isn't realistic. Templates and automation and things like that are extremely helpful. In terms of timeline, I believe that if you get an inquiry, you should say something to this person within 30 minutes. Within 30 minutes, they should receive some sort of contact from you. If this is outside of business hours and you're practicing a certain amount of work-life balance or something like that, it doesn't have to be much. Save a template in your phone where you could just fire off a text message to them or something. Say, hey, I just want you to know I got your inquiry. I'm waiting for my computer right now. When I get back in the morning, I'll send an email to you. Just some sort of contact with them in some way is all that needs to happen right away. Then as long as within like the next 24 hours you can get more of a full response to them, that's okay. But focus on that first little bit because remember, most of the time when a couple reaches out, they're not reaching out just to you. They're going to reach out to your competition at the same time. And who responds first and what it is that they say and how helpful that person is, that's your first impression. And first impressions mean a lot. And so if you can give the best first impression out of the 5 or 10 people that they reached out to, you're already at an advantage. So focus on speed as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, so let's say for those listening, a couple inquires with 10 photographers, right? And let's say
Mhm.
five have an automated response. Let's assume at least four of those just say, thanks for inquiring. We received your email. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. What can we say instead to stand out from those?
That's a great question. Focus on personal connection in if at all possible. This is when it's great to incorporate things like into your inquiry form, asking some amount of personal questions or just something about them aside from just their wedding, if you can. If you can't, and that's not something that you want to add in there, you can always focus on other details about their inquiry. What was their venue? What was their date? What other information have they given you? So that in that first response to them, you can have templates. You can have something saved in your email that's like, okay, here's the basic of what I sent back to people. There should be plenty of space in that, though, for you to institute some of your personality and then building personal connection with them. Especially for people like photographers, I think it's very, very important for them because they will spend so much time with the couple. Their personal connection and how they interact with is very, very, very important. Not that it's not for all vendors, but I feel like for photographers, it's especially important. So any amount that you can start building that personal connection with them right away is drastically going to increase your conversion rates. Because in the same token, if I'll use photographers as an example. If a couple reached out to 10 or 15 different photographers and they narrowed it down to five, and they're like, these are the ones that are kind of within our budget range, and we really like their shooting and editing style. What's going to make one of those photographers really stand out is if they had a connection with them. Even if they did multiple consultations, they'll remember the one that they connected with them on something. And that photographer, 9 times out of 10, is the one that's actually going to end up getting the booking. So focus on trying to cultivate that as soon as you possibly can.
Great. Now, what's a idea of what a strong, high converting follow-up sequence actually looks like? And that's in terms of the quantity or the method of delivery and so forth.
So I think it starts with some of the stuff that we already talked about. So as soon as the inquiry comes in, speed is key. So they should get something with you right away. That's part of great follow-up is just it started as soon as absolutely possible. Then when you're, assuming this is outside of hours or something, and you're coming back to them with more of a full response, you made an attempt to build that connection as quickly as you possibly could and answered their questions. There's nothing more irritating to couples than when if they ask you specific questions and you give them roundabout answers. It just frustrates people. So answer their questions, but build personal connection at the same time. Now, after this is where it's common to start experiencing a little bit of a gap in their response. And it's probably because, and this is where the context comes from, we talked about earlier, like where did this inquiry come from? If it came to you from your website or something like that, in effect, the couple reached out to you, which means if we take a step back, where are they in their wedding planning timeline? Well, they're at a point where whatever service it is you offer, that's what they're focused on booking. That's why they reached out to you, which means they also reached out to other people. That's why this gap of time usually happens because they're communicating with you and these other people. So following up during that time is key, but then also that's where you can start to incorporate some of those other things that we talked about too. Making sure you're encouraging them to, follow you on social media and things like that too. Because from there on out, what's ultimately going to make it really high converting is that it started off on the right note. You did it right away and you tried to build personal connection and you answered their questions. Now you're bringing them into sort of your world and your sphere of influence as a whole, during which time you are going to be pushing your services, yes, but also providing value and attempting to connect on a personal level as much as possible. And then ultimately, that process will go on until either they book you or they tell you that they booked somebody else. Those are the only two acceptable responses.
What is an example of value somebody can give in one of these follow-ups?
So I think that you can talk about all kinds of different things. So what kind of value can you give? Anything that you are an expert on. And I would say most vendors remember that you are an expert on far more about weddings than just specifically what it is that you do. Again, photographers and florists and things like that are great examples. They are experts on far more than like just the service it is that they provide. Florists can not only talk about florals, but they can also talk about locations and considerations of different things because they understand how this space is going to be presented. So you can, through your email marketing or through, your social media and stuff like that, convey a lot of that knowledge that you know. works for people like photographers and stuff too. They are experts on far more than just photography. They also have opinions on things like florals and stuff like that too. They have opinions on things like bridal parties and stuff. How many groomsmen really is too many? And why? When does that start to become a problem and things like that? Or what are the considerations? Offer this kind of information. And if you can build drip email sequences and things like that, where you can do this work one time and then ultimately benefit from it again and again and again, that's great. Because the temptation can be, if you're doing things only manually, to be pushing towards the sale all the time because you're focused on this one couple and this one sale. If you're stepping back and you're building systems that are fundamentally going to run portions of your follow-up, it's easier then to look at it from a big picture perspective because you're not so focused on this one inquiry and this one couple. It's more of how am I presenting myself as a whole. For something like email marketing, try to follow like the 80-20 rule. Like 80% of what you're sending people really just should be helpful information in some way that is like legitimately going to help them not only with choosing what it is that you do, but planning their wedding as a whole. And there's 1,001 different things that anybody listening is probably an expert in and has an opinion on.
Yeah, I'm thinking right now, like if I got a florist who had a follow up that was talking about whether or not I need to be worried about tariffs for my flowers as a couple and what I should do now, like even though that's not evergreen, I feel like that is so, it just shows you're like on the mark with what couples could be worried about or thinking about,
Exactly.
so that's
Exactly.
one I was thinking of now while you're talking.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and this may be an example of a way a vendor can create urgency without coming off as pushy, right? Because they're just saying,
Yeah.
hey, tariffs could be a thing. Let's get you booked now, so you don't
Yes.
have to deal with the price increase. What are other ways vendors can create urgency without being pushy or salesy?
Social media in general is a phenomenal place to be doing this because you can talk about all sorts of different things to do with your business. Um, Posting things in your stories and stuff like that about bookings are a great way to do it. You don't have to name people's names or anything. Obviously, it's probably best that you don't. But you can say things in your stories like, just got booked for this date at this venue, and I'm so excited. It's a wonderful couple. There's this special thing that they're gonna do, and I'm so grateful that I like get to be a part of it or something. This is a great way to like institute a certain amount of scarcity because the fundamental message of that story or that post is that I got booked again. This date is now gone, depending on how many events you can service on a particular date. But because of the way that you expressed it, which was from a standpoint of just like gratitude and like just being thankful for like what's going on, it doesn't really come across as like pushy. It just comes across as you being like a good, caring person. The fundamental message is still the same. Phenomenal example of how 90% of the time it's not really what you say, it's how you say it. So expressing it from a standpoint of positivity and gratitude is a phenomenal way to say, hey, another one of my dates are gone.
I think you had me thinking like, would it be fun to have like a remaining dates bingo card, right? And whoever books the last date to get the line, maybe they get like a special like thing.
It's a
or maybe
phenomenal idea.
Right? Or maybe it's just for your own thing. Like after I get the bingo, I go out to eat or, something like that.
Yep, that's a wonderful idea and would be a lot of fun. It's something that you could just keep repeatedly posting on your stories, and people are going to look at it then, which
Yeah.
is going to increase like your account engagement too. Because now people know this is a thing that you're doing and they see, oh, you got a new story that you posted. They're going to look and see is another take on,
Yeah.
and which is bringing them back to you, increasing your account engagement. Phenomenal idea.
What's a common mistake you see in consult calls that could be costing vendors the booking?
Oh, talking too much and focusing on the features. Um, I usually give people a general guideline and say that the couple is 50% of the conversation that's happening. So if they're not talking at least 50% of the time, it's probably an indication that you're talking too much. And if you are talking that much, also think about what it is that you're saying. If you're just talking about like the features of your service and things like that, this is a very analytical kind of approach. And it's going to get lost in a wash of a lot of other features and things that the couples are looking for. You can circumvent all of that and instead take a different approach where A, you're focused on getting them to talk a lot more so that you can get to know them. But this is also giving you insight and stuff about them so that when you are talking, you can do it from a standpoint of A, connecting with them. Connect with them on the things that they talked about. You'll have more to work with now because you let them talk a bit more. You encourage them to talk a bit more, which is kind of an art in and of itself, just to get them conversationally, like, sharing things with you. And then when you're presenting your services, you can focus then predominantly on the aspects of your services that you know are going to resonate most with them, because as opposed to presenting all of the different reasons why you're awesome, which is not bad, it's just somewhat overwhelming and doesn't necessarily resonate with everybody. By switching it and getting a lot more out of them first, and then presenting your stuff as like the solution to that, all through like a personal connection and like the fact that you're here to be helpful, makes a world of difference. This is also a situation in which more of your couples will walk away and ultimately probably do consults with other people too, or they already have done consults with other people, but yours is going to stick out because there's that connection.
Okay, I'm trying to think of a live example. So I talk to the couple, and maybe I then say, oh, well, our package is for, 8-hour coverage, which is great because you mentioned having a large family, and this way we can have plenty of time. What could be another example of how they can kind of tie in the couple's needs to their existing package and features?
Great question. So I'll use like just like photographers as an example or something. They're trying to push like a second shooter or something
Yeah.
maybe. And so they're like, hey, here's like an added thing, or maybe, some photographers, they're including a second shooter in more of them, not all their packages necessarily, but like a fair number of them. If the couple is saying things to you about like, oh, really being nervous being photographed, or like especially in front of other people, that maybe for something like an engagement session, it's not that big of a deal because like it's kind of just us, but like the wedding, there's going to be people there and there's all this anxiety, like they're conveying these sorts of anxieties to you. Okay, great. This is an opportunity to tie in that feature of offering a second shooter either in some packages and or all of them. So you could say things like to them, oh, I totally get that. Weddings can very much be overwhelming, especially when you're surrounded by family and friends and all these people and everybody wants to talk to you and stuff. That's actually why I almost always include a second shooter, because there are parts of your reception and stuff like that that we're not going to want to miss. People are going to be out there breaking down dance moves and stuff, and that's great. That's what a second shooter is for, because it's their job to capture those kinds of things so they're not missed, so that I can take you, we can go somewhere else for a little while. We can go do something else. We can spend some time together so that we're capturing parts of your wedding day that are like a little bit more intimate, like a little bit more just you. This is a way in which you're taking kind of like an underlying anxiety that they have expressed in some way, and you're tying it into specific features of your services, but you're tailoring it to how specifically that would benefit them in their situation, not just how it is a good thing in general.
I like how it also created like the visual. I saw you with the couple going off to take photos while the second shooter were there. So they're already kind of seeing you in their day, which I think is really important. If a vendor feels like their inquiries have slowed down and that their inquiries aren't converting, where should they start troubleshooting?
Go back to the tracking. Definitely break them down to those individual categories, because how you would troubleshoot each of those things is different. Because sometimes it can feel as though like your overall inquiries are going down, but it turns out once you break it all down that only your inquiries from like one specific area have gone down. And that, of course, yes, resulted in an overall lowering of your inquiries. But if you break it down and figure out like where that fall off is happening, that becomes a lot easier to troubleshoot then. If you break it all down and you're like, oh, it looks like I'm actually receiving the same number of referrals. And those are the only ones that I'm booking now at this point. But the difference is I haven't gotten any inquiries from like, Zola or, Instagram or something like that. Okay, great. Now you can focus on just that thing and troubleshoot just that. If it is your referrals that are falling off, well, then you can reach out to the people who were referring you before and be like, hey, how's it going? See what's going on there. Why aren't they referring you anymore? If it is fall off that's happening from, social media or something, then you can look at like your content that's been going out and be like, am I posting anything different than what I was before? Am I posting less than what I was before? But by first breaking it down into where exactly is this fall off happening, it gives you a massive advantage then in trying to troubleshoot that then and either go back to what you were doing before that was ultimately getting you more inquiries, or sometimes just things have changed. The market has changed, the platform has changed, and now okay, what's this part of my business right here that I need to sort of revise what's going on to get my inquiries come back up.
So my next two questions are going to be about you as a business owner, because here on the
Cool.
podcast, we love geeking out about that. So before I
Yeah.
do that, can you talk about some of the options you offer for generating leads? Because there's a multitude of them. So I'd like to hear it in your words.
Yes, definitely. We offer a variety of different options. So, social media ads, sales funnels, lead generation funnels, and things like that are a great way to drastically increase lead flow very, very quickly. Jess and I offer those sorts of things either from a done for you perspective, where we'll literally just build and manage them for you, or at the same time, like if you would prefer to learn, we do have a really great coaching program as well. We just teach you how to do it on your own. We offer that. We offer help with bringing in more of organic side of things, social media management, that kind of stuff. Also helps increase, inquiries and things that are coming in because you're increasing your exposure. We do also have a vendor outreach program. And the way that that works is it's our way of helping you build more of just your referrals and things that are coming in. This is where we have one of our team members that's working there with you who is doing a lot more of the outreach for you and getting you connected with more other vendors in your area and setting up referral relationships with them so that you can bring in more referral inquiries. So we like to say that we can help people regardless of how it is that you like to book your couples. If you're confident through selling and you want to do it through ads and leads, great, we got you. If you want to keep doing it organically through social media, we can help you with that too. If you're a super relationship-based person and you want to connect with more people, or you've just moved to a new area, and that's the way that you operated before, and you're like, I need to build connections in this new area, but it took me 2 or 3 years to do it last time. I don't have that long. I need it to go faster. We can help you with that as well.
Great. So a lot of awesome options there. And I know there's something for everybody within that. So that is really great. Now, Ron, the first question I want to ask, what is your morning routine?
Ooh, my morning routine. It took me a while to get worked into one. So I'll give you kind of an overview of what my morning routine is now, and ultimately what it was, at least for me, of why it was difficult to do that. For starters, now I am definitely the type of person who wakes up and gets out of bed right away. I don't lay in bed at all. I like wake up and get up. That's not easy. Most of the way I did that is that I don't keep my phone within reach when I go to sleep. I actually went online and bought just like an old school like digital alarm clock. And that's what I have, and that's why I wake up. So it's not really an option for me to just lay and scroll in bed. But once I get up, I like to have at least 2 hours in the morning before I start taking meetings and doing things like that. Because I spend a lot of my time in the morning going outside. I'm behind my computer and doing tech stuff so much that I love to just get outside, feel the grass, and like do outside project work around the house or something like that. And then usually around mid-morning, that's when like I settle in. I need to have a certain amount of those like smaller completed projects first, where like physically doing things before I work into just like utilizing my brain all the time. That was very, very difficult for me to adhere to for the longest time. And what finally clicked for me, and I think also Jess, was the realization that trying to just adhere to a morning routine was very, very difficult for us until we established a very, very good routine for the evening before. That how we were ending our day had such a drastic impact on how we were starting the next day that it almost just came this repeating cycle if we didn't do that. So now I have a very, very refined routine and deadlines and like timelines and stuff for myself of how I end my day. And it's made it so much easier for me to start my next day the way that I want to.
That's interesting, because this is why I'm asking, right? I ask everybody this. I'm trying to create a morning routine, and now I'm thinking, well, my nighttime routine is playing Pokemon Go until I run out of stuff, and
Yep,
then
yep.
scrolling all the book sites that I like and things like that. So maybe
Yep.
I need to address my evening routine in order to
Yes.
finally tackle the morning routine.
Yes, scrolling on your phone and watching TV in the evenings is, in my opinion, one of the two biggest reasons why people have a hard time in the morning.
Oh my gosh, but I'm so like attached to this routine. I put on wrestling on Peacock. They have the
Yep.
WWE network.
Yep.
So I'll do whatever. Like right now I'm binging, rewatching all the Summer Slams because that's the next
Yeah.
event.
Yeah.
So I may have to part with that. We'll see.
Do you do you want one of my otter suggestions for how to do
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jess and I went to Home Depot and we bought a Christmas light timer that you put for like your house, like on the outside.
Yeah.
And we bought one of those and we plug our TV into it. And then we set that to like a timer. So now when it's time to stop watching TV, it's not an option because the timer will kick off and literally cut power to your TV so that you can't even just like reach for the remote and like go to turn it back on because the whole power was cut to your TV. And that was one of like the final steps of what we had to do to literally just set a deadline for ourselves to be like, no, at this time, you're done watching TV and you need to start going to bed because it cuts the power to my TV.
I bet my husband would buy that so fast because I think he's so ready for the wrestling before bed and not in the, in the worst possible way. It's watching old wrestling. It's, so he'll be so excited with that tip.
I love it.
As a wedding industry educator and coach, how do you continue your own education?
Oh, a variety of different things. So one is just actively doing it. While yes, Jess and I do provide like coaching options and things like that, so much of what we do is still from like a done for you perspective. So for starters, just actively doing it all the time keeps me up to date on like what's happening with ad algorithms, how do things work, because these are campaigns and things that I monitor that like we're actively running for clients. That's one part of it. Um, I do also reach out to a lot of people too. Jess and I also pay for like coaching and education and stuff like that. I love getting other people's insights. Having any sort of a third party perspective on what you're doing is always extremely helpful. So Jess and I do the same thing. I have a number of different mentors and coaches and stuff that I regularly pay for their time just to be able to talk to them about things. And the last one is probably reading. Jess and I both read a lot, and I love not only like things that I read for fun, like fantasy books and things like that, but also like industry things. So I read a lot about like interpersonal relations stuff, like sales in general, marketing, because I think that a lot of those really good like classic books are classics for a reason because they're really good at hitting at kind of like core aspects of just human psychology and like the way that we work. And so I love diving into those kinds of things too, because it gives me this kind of core based knowledge as we continue to move forward in a world that where a lot of marketing happens digitally and things that are happening digitally change so fast that having a good core understanding of these like basic things helps to give all the things that are changing context to know what is probably going to change and what is probably not going to change.
Our listeners are actually really big readers, so and fiction as well. So if you don't mind sharing a
Yeah,
favorite fiction or fantasy fiction
sure.
and a favorite nonfiction, I know I and
Sure.
they would love to hear it.
Sure. So from a business side of things, I would say one of the best things to read there, if you're not read it already, is Jen Cicero wrote a book called "You Are a Badass at Making Money." Um,
That's a good. If
that
you
is a
haven't read it, listen to Ron read it.
yeah, all of her books are amazing, honestly. But like that's a good one. She also has like a pre, kind of prequel that's called "You're a Badass."
But the
You're a
money
badass at
one
making
is
money. Yeah,
like,
money's like solid. Her sense of humor is just amazing. I love the way that she presents things. So from a business perspective, definitely read that one. Personally, I'm kind of a sucker for all of Sarah J. Maas's stuff, honestly. Like I've read all of Akatar. I'm almost done with Crescent City. Jess has read them too, which is really nice because then we have like, conversations of what's going on with this character, what's going on with that character. So I am kind of a sucker for anything first. I haven't read Throne of Glass yet, but honestly, that's probably next.
yeah, yeah. Adriana and the Bee, who is another wedding marketer, is all about ACOTAR deeply, and she's very active on threads talking about it. So you two need to connect and
Yeah.
see how you can tie in Sarah J. Maas and wedding marketing together in some sort of
Yeah.
capacity. And I feel like that would be a really hot event. So Ron, where can
Um,
our audience find you and Jess?
so following on social media is always great. I mean, we're just Ron and Jess basically everywhere. Instagram's probably where we're most active. For anybody who actually, wants to chat or learn more about services and things like that, go to our website. It's just ronandjessmarketing.com. Sure, it'll probably be in the show notes and all that kind of stuff, so they can check it out there. And we do offer, a free discovery call for anybody who just wants to chat for 30 minutes or so and just get some opinions, on things and see, do I need help? Am I thinking about this the right way or something like that? So scheduling just a time to chat. Always happy to sit down with people. Meeting people and talking to people is one of my favorite parts of what we do. So
And I think you had a special offer for anyone who inquires and mentions the podcast, right?
Yeah, we do. So for most of the various services that we offer, at least the done for you ones, there is usually a setup fee that goes with it. So anybody who comes from the podcast, when you book a time to chat and it says, did someone refer you, you just put that this is where you came from, and we're happy to waive any and all setup fee that would apply for you, and we'll keep that indefinitely. So at any point, you can always come claim that.
Oh, great. I so appreciate that and so appreciate this conversation. We had laughs, we had fun and a whole lot of knowledge. Thanks so much for being here, Ron.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.